Well, I had collaborated with Jess Mularski prior to this project before, and we worked really well together. So I came up with her with an idea of doing something interactive with the students for their final project for the year. And we came up with the idea of doing something where the kids would create their own book.
We had this idea that it would be really awesome if we could create our own open source textbook for the World Civilizations courses, and hopefully for all of the courses at the high school eventually, that we could, put in a nice rotation to get updated every few years. So this was kind of our flagship project.
And they would create their own, they'd do the research, they do the revising parts of it, they would implement it, they would make media for it, and it would be their own final project would be that book.
If we can actually have them working collaboratively with teachers, with library media specialists and others to create the materials that they're using for their learning, but then also be able to share that with their classmates, with the communities, with the world, I think is a wonderful step forward for Branford and for everyone.
These kids were very familiar with us working together with them, and they knew that this was happening. They were very comfortable with doing the project because they knew we both would work with them.
And we had built their research skills throughout. They had other research components, so it wasn't like all of a sudden we were introducing all these foreign concepts to them at once.
We broke them into chapter groups, so there was chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3.
Each chapter was divided into a certain number of sections depending on what the chapter required.
And each chapter would communicate what topics are being compiled into their chapter, who's covering what topics, what they need to know from each topic, how it's going to flow.
So they were responsible for individual work, but then they collaborated with the rest of the people in their chapter to edit and to create their lessons, because after we completed the book, they were then responsible to teach the material to the rest of the class.
They had to compile their own page in the iBook, so they would have to write up to 500 words, so we kept it simple, we kept it concise. So those kids who don't like writing didn't have to write a 4-page paper. They had to write 500 words, which comes down to about 2 paragraphs or so. It was nerve-wracking getting them starting in the first part of the year, but by June, they were pros at research, they knew what they were doing, and that's a great skill for them to have.
We made sure that they just stuck to academic databases that are available through our library and through ICON. So they had to check every source themselves and then bring it to us for a double check. They also were required to triple check every fact.
The other aspects included media, multimedia, videos, having some sort of interactive activity. Each chapter needed to have a quiz at the end of it.
Once they had their draft, then they were given to a partner within their chapter, so within their group, and then they went back and did a pretty extensive peer editing process as well. And then we also submitted all drafts to turnitin.com, which is a plagiarism checking website as well. So they really got that we were trying to do our due diligence to make sure that we were following all copyright laws and working on paraphrasing and creating an authentic, original academic source for other people to use.
They weren't upset, they weren't afraid, they went into it, they put all their effort in, and they were great at it.
And then seeing what the kids were capable of, how something that you could do in a small classroom in Branford could really have an effect worldwide. I mean, not to sound melodramatic, but it really does. Like, it's a resource that other schools can use that is credible, and if you don't have money to pay for a textbook, you can do this.
It was great to see the students collaborating with each other and with the teachers so that they were producing this final open source document. And then this open source document then being available to people outside of Branford High School. It really brings our community into the global community.
We encouraged them positive reinforcement, getting them to see that this is their goal and they could reach their goal.
They definitely had a lot more respect for what teachers do as a result of it. So there was a lot of, I think, really cool outcomes from it.
Now they're published authors because of this. They're very excited about that.
They were excited, their friends and families were excited. I think for anybody, especially at this young age, to be a published author is a humongous achievement.
Yeah, published in the official iBooks Apple Store, available to anyone with an iOS device that wants to download it and experience it, a multimedia ebook.
I wrote about imperialism and how it affected the World War I. Now I know that it takes a lot of work to make it come together at the end. I guess it was just kind of really cool to say that I'm an author now.
I wrote about the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. I found a clipping, like an old video, and I used a lot of photos from like the time period. I learned a lot about how important it is to make sure that what you're saying is like the best version of what you're saying, because we had to fact check everything that we wrote a lot and make sure that it was like undoubtedly true, and that's really important when you're writing anything. I thought it was like a cool way to like kind of learn in a different way, and also made you kind of learn more, because if you have to teach something, you're going to learn it better.
I did naval warfare. I've always been interested in like boats and ships and things, so I thought it would be cool to learn more about the naval warfare of World War. I found a really interesting old video of a naval warfare battle on YouTube from that time period. I had to email the person and get permission from them. I wanted to make sure I wasn't breaking any copyright laws. It was really easy to see, like the more work that you put into it, the better it came out.
I learned about how imperialism contributed to the war. I really like history, so it was exciting to me, but the multimedia aspect of it kind of scared me. I'm not really good with computers. I learned how to make a video using iMovie and how to make like interactive pictures.
Mine was on the U.S. entering the war. I didn't know a lot about the topic at first. After I would read an article, I went and I would find another article that was credible, and I'd check it for there, and then I'd check another article, so I'd make sure I had it 3 times, because that was the assignment. We had to make sure each fact was credible 3 times. It's definitely hard, I know that. It took a lot of work, so I'll definitely have, when reading a textbook, I'll know that this person put a lot of work into it.
The economic aftermath. It was an interesting topic too. I was able to stay on topic in my group. We all worked together very well, so it was easier to work on everything. Once we started doing it, it was actually really interesting, and I actually learned a good amount of my topic and the other topics. I learned a lot about the Great Depression and how hard life was during that time period, and I learned a lot about World War I in general and who the leaders were and where the battles took place. It was pretty great. I really liked seeing it on the iBook store. I felt accomplished.
Learning goes so far beyond the boundaries of a classroom now. I think this project is a great example of that, because they not only used so many different resources to develop this book, but now this book is there in the form that is the best way for students to learn.
A project like this really offers the students an opportunity to be not only active learners, but creators of their own education, which
we'll keep doing it, right?